On this episode, I'm excited to bring on an old friend, Nathan Kennedy, goes by the handle of New Money Nate, and has over 1 million followers, great influencer and creator. On this episode of the Wise Old Owl podcast, Nate, thanks for coming on. Great to see you again.
Yeah.
From those Instagram days, I had you on in those early episodes, and I'm so happy to have you back now in a podcast.
100%. This is wonderful, man.
Because that whole
so
TV thing, the Instagram thing didn't really work. I'm really glad you're here. You have taken off.
Gosh, thank you, man.
This is really exciting. And to see you grow makes it even more great for me to have you here. But 1 million followers.
Yeah.
How's the journey been?
It's been crazy. I mean, I think, I don't know. I don't even think about it like that. I just think, I've been trying to go in and day out, and that's sort of what I've been doing for a few years now. And it's sort of compounded, but super excited and so happy to have the chance to keep doing this.
So the last time we connected on IG, you still had a job.
Yeah.
And we had the discussion in my backyard. You're thinking about giving it up.
Yeah.
Going all out.
Was that the last time we saw you in person?
Yeah, I was in the backyard, and you were debating whether to go for it. And you sat there with Mark and I, and we were like, "Go for it, man!"
Yeah,
you got the content, and you did it.
Yeah.
So how did that feel? What were the first few months like? And look at you now. This, I bet you're never looking back.
No, I try. I haven't, and it's been crazy. I think it's been about 2.5 years now of being full time, and it was tough. I was working at PepsiCo, and I was making good money, and but I don't know. I felt like when I started this page, I started it during 2020, so it was going down then, and all I had was content, and that's all I was doing, and I just remember thinking man, this is I just want to do this, forget everything else, this is just what I want to do, and so when the money started to come in late 2020, and it started to beat what I was making from my job, I was making 70, 80 grand from my job, and I was making more from content, so I was like, man, I think I got something here. And so I figured, I was 23 or 24 at the time. And so I figured, why not just give a year, see what happens. If not, I got savings, whatever, I'll just go back and work corporate because it's always going to be there. And thankfully I didn't have to. So,
well, I'm going to confess, you're a big financial literacy guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the stream I want to go in. Everything you did inspired me. I know Mark pushed me into the social media realm from TV, but seeing how you did it just said, well, you know what? I could take it from an older guy's angle and try to do some stuff. But I commend you, man. You stuck with it. Consistency, authenticity. I like how you do the dual interview stuff, the 1-2 skits. I don't know if I could do that, but that looks hard. That looks really cool. And you've really been able to touch a lot of young folks and help them with financial literacy.
Yeah.
What do you think got you through to them? What is it that really connected with them that just pushed you through to these numbers of followers?
Yeah, you early on, I'm a big analytics guy, and I would just throw things at the wall early on and see what would stick and what would resonate. And you kind of, as a creator, you build stories after the fact. It seems very obvious. It's hindsight 2020, whatever. And creating, you kind of see afterward, of course that didn't work. I mean, it's like any sort of creation, whether it's art or music or whatever. It's of course, you look back and you say, of course that didn't work, or of course it worked, whatever. So I would try to take whatever learnings I could, because I know that there was a bunch of other stuff like the algorithm, whatever. And then I would kind of see, okay, what worked, what didn't, and then just double down on what worked and X out what didn't, within what I wanted to do. And so I kind of just kept doing that over and over and over. And what I found was talking about actual actionable things that people could go out and do, was the biggest thing for me. Things that steps you could take today, whether it's TFSA or a Roth IRA for Americans, or a 401k, getting started with that, getting started with investing, index funds. You don't need to be this big stock investor. You can just put money in long-term index funds, and you just let the money ride and you beat the Wall Street guys, stuff like that. And while also sharing the fact that you could be wildly successful if you're just a little bit patient, right? You can have millions of dollars in 20, 30, 40 years, right? Not tomorrow. And so if I can kind of paint the story of you can have anything, you just can't have everything. I found that people are okay, well, this guy's not trying to sell me anything. but I could maybe do something, or maybe like for me, I'm not trying to like be the guy that's telling you every last thing. It's just like, hey, maybe I like push you in the right direction. And so I think that's resonated.
Now, you did start on podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and then you shifted to Instagram and TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And, we talked earlier, you got a very large American audience.
Mm-hmm.
You're Canadian.
Yeah.
How much effort and research did you have to put into American type products? Like you mentioned the Roth, which is the equivalent of the RSP here. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it's more TFSA. Roth IRA is more TFSA, and then the 401k is
401k,
more,
sorry, is the RSP.
Yeah.
Like how much research did you have to do to kind of understand the American lingo? Because it is a little bit different. Mortgages are a lot different in the States than here.
You write off the mortgage interest, right? Like
for first-time buyers, there is a cap. You could write off a certain amount. So they got advantages. They got 30-year terms here.
Well, no, that's the big one.
Yeah.
That's the big one. Like they could have 2 or 3% locked in for 2-3 decades, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but no, for me it was sort of osmosis. Like I was around a lot of that content, and I would seek it out, and I would teach myself a lot of it. But ultimately, the stuff that really does well in America is the stuff that's more general, right? Like I do a lot of career stuff now, right? We're talking about negotiating with your boss, getting a raise, like how are you going to make money?
I love those.
I appreciate that.
It really gives viewers an insight on leverage. Like give yourself some self-worth, right? Don't shortchange yourself. And I really think that was the message there.
Yeah.
They seem to gravitate well because they do big numbers for you.
Yeah. I love them because listen, I made a video today. Most people don't want to be these crazy Elon Musk entrepreneurs, right? Most people want to have a nice job, make some good money, have a good family, have a little bit of time to do what they need to do on the weekends. And like, that's pretty much it. And so this whole notion that the rat race or whatever is this big, terrible thing. I'm like, I think a lot of people would kill for a nice, cushy 100K job and a good family and like do that. Like that's more realistic, and that's way more attainable than promising you millions overnight, right? And so I think meeting people where they are with the career stuff, it's like a lot more people have a job than they run a business. And for me, I wanted to speak to those people because I feel like a lot of the business owners are going to figure it out. Like one way or another, like they're in their arena. Like there's only so much I can say to them, right? I think the person that is trying to become more financially literate, and of course, business owners, whatever, but they're just so much more hands-on in a lot of cases. And so for me, I wanted to help the people that I think I could make that big enough impact for. And so ultimately, those videos started to resonate really well. The negotiation stuff always does well. That was a theme that I found early on. Boggled my mind. Like the first one I made was years ago, and it wasn't even like I just suggested maybe you should negotiate, and I got so much blowback. And then I just kept pulling that thread of like, why are people so against this? I'm gonna lean into it. I'm gonna tell them, hey, you can negotiate. Like the top dogs, they negotiate, and so you got to do that. And so I think that's why that gets engagement, because there are a lot of people that are kind of like, I don't know if that's possible, or I'm scared or whatever. And so I just try to help them work through that. But yeah, I try to meet people where they are, and I try not to paint this crazy picture that they can't paint for themselves. Like I'm like, hey man, you're like 1, 2, 3 things away from like really, making something of yourself. So like, I'm just going to try to push you in that direction.
I consider myself very lucky. I got a son who's an influencer, but he does more comedy. Mm-hmm. You're in the financial literacy side, and we got to know each other over the years. How much responsibility do you feel you have to your followers, because you're growing and growing, and you're teaching them something, you're giving them some insight on things that they're probably not very well versed on. Yeah. They don't teach financial literacy in school. They probably should. They say they are, but for the most part, people aren't seeing the budgeting side, how taxes work. What responsibility do you feel you have as your audience has grown over the years? Yeah,
I think I always try to keep them first. And I do think that I forget that like a good amount of people watch my stuff, and I don't want to do wrong by them. And so I do think I want to always talk about the right things and be one of the quote unquote like good guys, like talking about like the more longer term stuff. I think obviously where you can get compromised is when the money gets involved and companies offer you a lot of money. Like let's take FTX, they were approaching a lot of creators. They didn't approach me. Thank God they didn't approach me. I don't think I would have said yes, but you know what? Like We all have a number.
We all have a number.
But you know what? And you know what? They were one of the tier one brands. And you know, a lot of creators thought that if I'm going to talk about crypto at all, maybe Coinbase, FTX, and like everybody else, like those are like I don't know, the tier one brands, the trusted brands. Like you're going to be safe with those brands, and like that absolutely wasn't the case. And so that was a huge lesson for a lot of financial creators in particular. And so for me, I learned by their burns, to be honest. Like I like to think that I probably wouldn't have taken that whatever, and I haven't
dodged a bullet.
You know, I dodged a bullet, right? So I always think that that taught me a lesson. I was like, okay, well, you really got to vet these companies, no matter how big of it or how great of a brand. We're talking about people's money, people's livelihoods here, right? And so if you're going to talk about stuff, you have to be really, really clear about what they're doing. And so I'm really careful about like all my investment stuff. Like I work with, you know, big Canadian banks. I work with investment firms, whatever. Very, very, very cautious now just because of that one instance. And, you know, I took that learning.
You got your guard up.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to sharing that kind of stuff where people are like, I'm saying, hey, people put your money here or there. First of all, I won't say that. Full stop, just won't say that. I'll say, hey, here's this thing that's out there. You could check it out and do your own research. Like I'll be very vague with that because I have to be, right? And I can't, as a non-licensed person, right? I'm in the process of getting licensing and stuff like that. But as of right now, I have to be very careful with that, right? Because I can't give financial advice. And so I think when I think responsibility, like that's where my head goes. It's like, hey, like when we're talking dollars and cents, like I'd be very careful there.
Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier, you gave up a job to do this full time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people looking from the outside in don't realize how much work is involved in coming up with content. Like we talked earlier before we got on, how much effort's involved in coming up with the creative process.
Yeah.
Where do you get your new content from? Like you have a lot of followers. I'm sure there's a lot of engagement content. Do you cater to the questions of the day? How are you generating this new content? Because it's a lot of work. It's a grind, right?
Yeah, I think early on, it was a lot of inspiration and seeing what people were doing and figuring that out. And still, I definitely am one of those guys that has his eye on everything and seeing what everybody's doing. And I got a pulse, you know? These days, though, I really have found that I have a big enough body of work where I can kind of reference that a lot more. And I find that a lot of my stuff now is more iterative. Like it's more, you know, what was this one thread that I pulled? Like I'll talk a lot about job stuff, but I also talk a lot about like family stuff, relationships, money, things like that. What are some past topics? So there was one recently where I saw that I did see this. This was a creator where she was talking about relationships, 50-50. Partner makes a lot more money. Who pays what, right? And for me, I had talked about relationship content and like, you know, girlfriend, boyfriend, you know, you're not married, or if you are married, like how could you kind of have that discussion? And I realized, okay, like what did I do right in this video? I saw this one topic that resonated well. So then I made a skit, like one of the videos we were talking about, around a gentleman who was making, I think it was like 300 grand. And then his wife was making, or partner was making 75 grand. And he paid 3/4 of the rent. And proportionally, it was a much smaller percentage of his income than it would be of hers. And from an equity perspective, it was fair. But from an, 50-50 thing, it wasn't fair. And so it generated a ton of like opinions, as you can imagine, right? Oh my God, you're
that's
getting rich,
good.
Whatever. But that's the kind of content you want, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sharing my opinion, but I'm still allowing, the other character in the skit is being like, that's ridiculous. And then the guy's being like, well, this is what it is. Like, I'm happy to do that. And, I don't want to limit myself, or I don't want to limit us and what we can do. And so I always try to find that like tension and pull that thread. And so I look at like past stuff that's sparked that. And then how can I like iterate on that and iterate on that and iterate on that? And I find I get a lot more of my inspiration from that. But definitely, I know we got some film guys here. I've actually started to like, I try to take a little bit of cinematography into my stuff. I'm trying to like add a little bit of production quality and like make it a little bit different. I think, it's a little bit different than your sort of run of the mill like TikTok skit. And so I've been looking at like Suits, for example. Take a lot of inspiration from Suits, like Billions. a lot of HBO high finance stuff, Succession, tons of scenes, the way they shoot it, stuff like that. Like, how can I recreate a little skit like that's similar, like Kendall talking to, Logan Roy, and like, how can I with myself? I
love Succession.
Exactly, right? Like, how can I sort of emulate that with my content? So that's sort of like where my head goes. Yeah.
Now, with respect to the content relative to the season of the year, we have RSP season, we have tax season, we have financial literacy month. Do you cater your content to the time of year?
Not necessarily. I think if I think it makes sense, I will. But a lot of the stuff I talk about is like evergreen, like it's stuff that's sort of relevant. I'm not like a newsy kind of guy. Like if something drops, like I'm not really like on that telling everybody about it. I try to talk about things that will last the test of time, and you can watch it in a couple of years. Because believe it or not, like TikTok, you get to watch stuff from like 2022, 2023. Yep. Like it's actually a pretty deep catalog that will resurface, right? So I try to keep that in mind. But I think certainly if it is something like, I remember early on, I was definitely very on the, like, especially Canadian specific. Like I got my start with like,
Wealth Simple.
I got my start with, they had all that government assistance with, I don't want to say the word YouTube or whatever, but during 2020 when they were giving out all the government money and how to do that effectively, the CERB and the Ontario whatever, they're helping out parents, the grants, whatever. How can you get that money? Tell your parents about it, stuff like that. Did you see that? Did I see that? Whatever. I definitely, that's how I cut my teeth, like with a lot of it, because that's easy stuff and that's viral stuff that you'll share, right? Like, and so, but these days I don't know. I'm more so just like evergreen stuff for sure.
So as we delve into the issues of the day, affordability, cost of living is a big challenge for young people. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much your audience. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is the biggest struggle you're finding with youth on the cost of living side and the affordability side?
I think the first thing is it's gotten so like detached from reality that people just aren't even trying. Like they're not even like, it's hard to even get them to care about like saving 10K for a down payment, because they're just like, for what? To buy it? Like the house is $1 million anywhere within a 50-kilometer radius or whatever, right? I have to go to, I don't know, Flamborough or like, near Windsor or something to get something that I would want. And so like, I find you kind of have to fight through that a little bit and say, hey, well, renting isn't the worst thing in the world, and you can invest in other markets, and you can develop your career and, increase your income, and it'll take some time, but eventually you'll settle down. Maybe instead of your, mid to late 20s, it's in your, early to mid 30s, you actually buy a home for yourself. And that's unfortunate. And there's a lot of reasons for that, political, economical, whatever. But like, that's just what it is. And it's not changing anytime soon.
What's interesting is I've been doing this longer than an amortization schedule. And
you're very good at what you do.
And what's interesting is, when I started in this business in the early 90s, there wasn't the expectation as there is today. Like, buying a home probably happened when people were getting married. Now that's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But
that's how I think about it.
Yeah, like that's the reason why you buy a home. And then when you buy that home, you buy a starter home, mm-hmm. right? And then maybe you have a kid and you look at renovating it and maybe looking at putting a deck in and maybe doing the kitchen and maybe one day finishing the basement and maybe get an in-law suite or maybe a basement apartment. And today, Instagram, social media, whatever it is, has made everybody impatient.
Yeah.
Right? Like today, people come buying a house and they want the chef's kitchen.
Yeah.
They want a finished basement. Yeah. They want the outdoor entertainment area
with
a pool.
Counter's got to be granite.
Right.
And marble,
I got to have cedar deck.
Yeah.
Right. And I got to have the great landscaping because it's got to all look good. And everything, they want it now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge. I think people need to set goals. And when I heard you talking about that, I almost feel like people have lost hope.
No, I think they have, and it makes me sad because I do think that like it's not a matter of like you can't do it. It's just going to take longer. You can do it.
Like, I'll give you an example. You know, we got 3 boys. I started the RESP when they were born. And I was thinking, like, shit, you know, this is $2,000, $3,000. Like, how's this ever going to help? I was always worried about the cost of education. But, you know, over 18 years, 20 years, this thing grew. And
I can imagine.
Taking them out of private school and going to university was a discount for me because I don't have to spend any money anymore.
Exactly.
And now they haven't even used it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
it's a problem. You have all this leftover money, right?
So it's like, holy shit. Why can't people think about it in, like, set goals over time? Like, you know, the home savings account is a 15-year plan. You start at 18, maybe you buy at 33. You could save some money.
Yeah.
Right? But it seems like social media, as you said, everybody wants it now.
You want it now.
And how do you break through to that audience to give them that hope? Because I do see the look of despair.
Yeah.
Like, I always use this term. I think people are angry, sad, and mad.
Yeah.
But that's all I see. Like, you know, Trudeau's talking about 8 out of 10 people get a carbon rebate and they're further ahead. Well, 8 out of 10 people that come in my office are angry, sad, and mad.
There's a disconnect.
And the rebate does shit for them. How do we help these folks get through it, push through?
Yeah.
Because you're doing your part.
Yeah.
What else do you think can happen out there that could give these kids and youth a fighting chance?
You got to reframe everything. That's what I try to do. Like, why do you want a home? Like, let's start with that. Like, why do you want a home? Is it because your parents wanted a home? Is it because you think it's a good investment? Well, I could show you a lot of numbers that say it's not, for a lot of reasons. If you're not cash flowing it and it's out of your means and you're going to be totally house poor or cash poor and you're totally illiquid and, oh God, variable rates. What are those? Well, I had 2, now it's 8. Now I was paying $1,500. Now I'm paying $4,500, $5,000. I think a lot of people weren't educated on how that works.
No, they weren't.
And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of rentals up because people can't afford their mortgage anymore. And and that's from people who didn't ask why they wanted the home. And so that's
you know,
where
I get upset because you know, people come in all the time and their mortgage come up for renewal and it's a rental property and they're on a variable. And I'm thinking, holy shit, like, why are you in a variable?
They had no idea. You have
a fixed rental. You have fixed rental income that really can only go up by max 2.5%. During COVID, it went up 0.
Yeah.
And you should have a fixed mortgage payment. Like, you got to match your biggest expense with your revenue. And everybody just got greedy. And they got bad advice. And, you know,
and free money. Like, it's just money was coming out of hoo-ha.
And we could blame it. We could blame the government, Bank of Canada, all you want. But at the end of the day, it's up to people to make sure they're well-versed and understand the risks. And when I started in this business in the early 90s, in the mortgage business, I started going out with a bailiff collecting homes. Like, that's how I started. It wasn't a lot of lending. Like, it was a shit show. And I saw the ugly side of it, and everybody just discounted that. No, it'll never happen again. Well, here we are.
Well, I mean, even 08, right? Like, people thought that was like a fever dream, never to happen again, right? And rates will be 0 forever. And, you know, the Fed's going to do this, or the Bank of Canada, rates are always going to be lower forever. And I think, again, that's why I come back. Like, why do you want a home? You really want, like, look at the people that are losing their shirt right now because they didn't ask that question to themselves. And so if you reframe that and say, hey, maybe I should focus on my career. Maybe I should, you know, try to get to 6 figures and try to elevate myself. Or maybe I should start that business, put everything into that and have some disposable income. And rent's expensive, I know, but at least in some areas it can be manageable and you can save portions of your income. And then you'll get there to where you know, because housing for a lot of people is a consumption good. It's a consumption good. It's not an investment. It's more of a savings plan than it is an actual investment. Like, it's great because I feel like my parents' generation, you know, like they didn't know any better. And so thank God that they had a mortgage that they were paying down and they have equity in their home because they wouldn't have a dime otherwise, right? And so, but that's like the base case. I think in the most, you know, high agency sort of situation, saving, putting your money in the market and being patient over time, like, you'll have the disposable income and the savings to eventually put down a down payment, I think, because you'll outpace it.
And I think what can be very useful is to start thinking outside the box a little bit, right? So if you're a young couple and you've lived in the basement apartment, you lived in a 500 square foot condo, whatever the case is, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. as a renter.
No.
But if you want to buy a home, maybe you find something that has the ability of a basement unit.
Yeah.
And you live in that basement unit to start off with and rent up the main unit, right? And all of a sudden, guess what? You got some additional income to help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And it may not look like it did in 2020 and 2021 when everything was going through the roof and interest rates are at 1.5.
Yeah.
But it can get you to where you want to be if you start thinking back how it should work.
Yeah.
Get in as a starter home, work within your means, maybe find a place outside in the burbs.
Yeah.
Or renting's not a bad thing either.
If you're building your net worth in other areas and asset classes, that's totally fine. I think real estate as an asset class is a fantastic, wonderful asset class, right? But there's other ones. And I'm a big fan of the stock market. I'm a big fan of building your business and building, and betting on yourself and things like that. But I 100% agree. I think a good house hack, if you can get in and rent out the bottom unit or whatever, house hack, yeah, wonderful thing. It's hard for me to make a video about house hacking and off Bloor and whatever the hell, because it's like, dude, like I need 100 G's to do a house hack.
But I should show you some of the repurposed projects we got going on, turning a single family into 4 units. I think that could
100%.
That could provide you some content.
Like a multi, right?
Yeah, and people could see it and touch it and feel it, right? And see what's possible. And it may be a long-term goal.
Yeah.
But it is possible with the new bylaws and the new density
100%
bylaw changes. So I think people just got to think of the whole concept a little bit differently because of the affordability issue.
Yeah.
And I got the sticker, a magnet on my fridge, and it's the year I was born. And Mark always says, I can't believe that you could pay off your home with 2 years income.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, that's impossible, Dad. I said, yeah, it is. But when I was born, I couldn't buy a house.
Yeah.
I wasn't even crawling yet.
Yeah,
so, everything's, you got to put in perspective, but rates were 14, 15%. But, I digress. Your audience, you're putting out some great content. You're getting some great opportunities, and it continues to grow and grow and grow. What's in the future for Nate?
I don't know. I'm really focused on writing and becoming a better writer. I just launched a newsletter called The Career Earner, and I'm focused.
I subscribe.
Yeah, thank you.
I did subscribe.
And so that really ties into a lot of the content that I'm talking about, and I just want to expand on it. I have to get a post out tomorrow, actually, so I got to do that tomorrow. But I want to help people and meet where they are and get them to the next step. And then how do you get rich over time working your 9 to 5? How do you save 10, 20, 30% of your income? How do you work towards some of the goals within, the constraints of, the corporate environment or whatever? And so I'm super passionate about that. And
how about a book?
Really excited about that. I mean, who knows? Who knows about that? Who knows? And speaking to, I think it'd be really cool. I'm starting to do more of that. But other than that, just continuing to create content, do good stuff, and just take it as far as I can go,
So let's talk a little bit about your accounts, your top 3 videos.
Yeah.
What were they?
My top 3 videos, like views or ones that my favorites, or
your top views.
Top views. Top one was similar to the family. It was a family topic. It was parents charging their kids rent. Yeah, and
that'll be a good one. That's forward.
That was a banger across everything. There was everybody.
That's a perfect. Let me share this with the kids.
Yeah. I got a lot of love from parents. That was my most viewed video across everything.
How many views did it get?
Across everything, 10 million.
That's fantastic.
Maybe. Yeah,
that's good.
Something like 10 million, and I think it was crazy because I think that was one of those ones.
Were you expecting it to be a banger?
I thought it could be okay, and I'll tell you, we were talking about inspiration. I saw a Globe and Mail article about it. That's how I got the idea. I go, oh my God, this is box office. People are gonna go lose their mind over this. And so I made the video, and it did quite well. And there's a lot of opinions, but I think that goes back to what I was saying with, inspiration, creation, whatever. You find it in different places, and when you find it, you go 100 miles an hour. And so yeah, and I did a few other videos, supplemental videos. The one video, the premise of the one I'm talking about was sort of a story where, he's charging his kid straight from 18. I think it was $500. He's like, well, you're making all this money. He was whatever in the story, he was making money. He's like, hey, $500 a month if you want to live here. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm 18. I got to go to school. I got to do this, I do that. He's like, $500. Like, I guess I'll find the money. And then, 7 years goes by, he finishes undergrad, whatever. He's looking for a home. And he goes, man, I don't have enough for a down payment. And then, the dad says, well, you got like 70 grand. And he's like, what did he say? Saved it, invested it for him, right? And that's the story. And people either loved it or they hated it.
No,
they
but
thought it was stupid.
But
a
lot of people do that,
exactly,
right? It's to teach them a lesson that, listen, this isn't free.
Yeah.
But here's a way to create a savings vehicle, and whether they tell them or not is
well, that was the discussion. Oh, this is manipulative. Well, I'd get manipulated for $70,000.
Hey, he's giving it back. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And he paid the tax on it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Before we leave, what are 3 tips? Your biggest tips to give young people today?
I think don't underestimate a 9-to-5 job. You make a lot of money doing that, and it's not tax advantage. You're gonna get taxed, especially in Canada. Whatever, tax rates aren't amazing, but there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful career paths that are out there if you really look out there. So don't think that you need to start a multi-million-dollar business to be successful. You could be, and that's literally all I talk about is like. You can be so successful.
And you're pro ESOP, like if there's an employee stock option program,
100%,
take
right?
advantage of it,
RSP matching. I guess that's the second tip. You got an RSP matching, that's free money, right? If let's say they match up to 5% of your income, you match that. That's free money. That's 100% return on your money plus the appreciation, the compounding of the investment. The other thing is, you got to actually invest it. So make sure it's invested. Because I've talked to people who are like, yeah, I'm taking the match, whatever. And I help them and I go, it's in a money market. It's in cash. Dude, you're in cash for the past few years. Like, well, what do you mean? I thought you gotta talk to Manulife or whoever the hell's on your thing, right? So I would say make sure it's invested. And the third thing I'll leave, because I'm sure a lot of Canadians are listening to this, is student loans. With a lot of student loans, there's the federal portion of the student loans there's no interest accruing right now. So it's like a relief for like young, borrowers, right? Which is great. And the thing about that is a lot of Canadians, their student loan is majority federal. And the federal portion is what's being paused. So there's zero interest. And then there's a small provincial portion. Now, because of rates, the provincial portion is accruing at like 8%. Or something
prime
like
plus
that.
Something.
Prime plus, like I think it's like prime plus 2 or prime plus 1, or whatever it would be. And so that sucks because then you have this interest-free portion, then you have this small thing that's just like accruing interest. Well, what you can do is write a check directly to the National Student Loan Service Center and say, hey, I want this check to go towards the provincial portion, and you can clear that.
That's interest paying.
That's the only way you can do it. You clear the interest paying thing, and then now you have this 0% loan that you can pay back over 1 billion years because inflation's eating out of it at that point.
It's the Buzz Lightyear
exactly.
loan, right?
Buzz Lightyear.
Infinity and beyond.
Exactly. Inflation's eating that. You make your payments. I'm not saying don't make your payments, but like there's literally no financial incentive for you to pay that off. You should take your time. Dude, 100 years amortized. Who cares? Because it's not costing you money. Eventually you'll pay it off, but you've got no interest accruing. Now, when they roll that back, because they probably will, because they'll realize how much people aren't paying back their loan. They're just...
Well, they might leave it.
I hope they leave it, but when they leave it, we'll pay it off. But I think in the meantime, talk to your kids, or if you have student loans, like send a check into the NSLSC, get rid of that provincial portion because it's skyrocketing in interest, and then you got an interest-free loan, baby. Like that's... I think a lot of Canadians don't know that. A lot of people that have student loans don't know that. So that'd be my 3 tips there. Yeah.
How do people find you?
I'm New Money Nate on everything, and then Nate New Money on Instagram, and then the Career Earners, the newsletter, and yeah.
Listen, this was great.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
And we gotta have you back again.
This place is. Let's do this again.
Hey,
this is wonderful.
Hats off to Rosie at Spaducci Mercado. She let me use the space because my office was a disaster with sound and lighting.
Oh, you got like a.
So she volunteered it and said, "Do it here." I'm like, "Okay, we'll do that." So listen, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, and we gotta do it again.
Yeah, 100%. This is too cool not to. Too cool.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much.